The Tabletop Bellhop team is here to answer your gaming and game night questions.
Tonight's question comes from Lucas Sorensen.
Lucas asks, what is your favorite microgame? Deck of playing card sized or smaller? My favorites are button shy games. You should check out Battle Crest.
Well, thanks so much for the question. Now, this isn't something we've covered before, so this should be interesting.
Yeah, I got to say, when this one showed up, I was like, yeah, we've never really talked about microgames. Do we have microgames? Have we played microgames? And then I'm like, yeah, I think we played some, but wait, what is a microgame? So that, I think, is a big part of this. And I think it's worth talking a bit about what that term means, especially nowadays, because I think it's changed over the years. Now, I know Lucas specifically said a deck of playing cards are smaller. So yes, there's one definition right there. A deck of playing cards are smaller. But I got to say, if you allow a deck of playing cards, you're looking at thousands of potential microgames, and we're just going to list the best card games ever made, right? like euchre, poker, are those microgames? Those don't feel like microgames to me. As well as any other card game that's out there that uses a similar size deck, right? Like Point Salad, is that a microgame, and so on.
Or like we talked about the Deadlies, which is 52 cards. That's a deck of card size, but is that a microgame? It feels like not, right? So
yeah, exactly. And I got to say, other people's definitions do vary wildly, ridiculously. Some people say smaller than a deck of cards. Yeah, that seems to be a pretty agreed upon. Smaller than a deck of cards, not a deck of cards or smaller, but smaller. But like I saw people saying Splendor is a microgame, and I'm like, I don't know. There's this whole deck of cards. There's 3 decks of cards. You've got all those chips, plus you've got the tokens for the nobles. Plus it comes in a pretty big box. And yes, there is the whole air issue with Splendor, and it does get smaller without the box. But I don't know. I can't see that, thinking of that as a microgame. And at least one person I found on the internet on Reddit was very insistent for it to be a microgame. It had to fit in their wallet. So the opinions on this seem to widely vary from pretty dang big to ridiculously small.
Now, one definition we found does list a microgame as being an addition of a game with 20 components or less in a box of 20 cubic inches or less.
Which that doesn't seem too bad. Like, I actually like the 20 component thing. I think that works for most games I think of as microgames. And I might have worked for every game on our list coming up. It's pretty close, like close to 20 components. But honestly, 20 cubic inches or less, I don't know. To me, microgame isn't just the size of the box. What's important for a microgame is how portable they are. And while game boxes can be tossed out and you can put games into photo cases. And honestly, one of the definitions I almost want to say is like, if you can put it in one of those photo cases and then store 20 of them in one of those big boxes, you got a microgame.
Yeah, right. That is a good definition. It fits in a photo case. Boom, it's a microgame. But if you're saying box size doesn't matter and I can repackage it, then that opens up the definition to a whole slew more games. Yeah. And I'm also thinking there's no way Splendor is a microgame. Not in the wildest sense. Just the tokens are so big and heavy. How is that a small portable game? I wouldn't even, because I was thinking of these. I thought of some games that I think are just a step up from a microgame. They are a travel game, like Travel Quirkle. It's small, It's portable. I would toss it in my bag, but I would not call it a microgame. And I'm pretty sure it has more than 20 components. But some of the ones in our list may have more than 20 components. But Splendor, at no point even in the travel game category. And then the 20 component thing. What I found while trying to make this list today was it's really hard to figure out how many cards are in some of these games without taking them out and counting them. I couldn't easily find the information for some of them. So we may be over if that's your definition.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We couldn't find component counts. A lot of the ones I saw were. Where I was really on the fence was like half a deck of cards, like Red 7, right? It's in the smallest possible card deck. It's simple rules. I don't know how many cards are in it, but it's not 52. I almost had it on the list, but then I compared it to the other stuff I had on the list that was smaller, and I decided to leave it off.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's also a whole other definition of microgames that confuses the matter even more.
Yeah, because going back to the 1980s, there was, I don't know if it was trademarked, but Steve Jackson Games put out a series of games that were called microgames. And if you asked any gamer in the 80s, hey, you got any microgames or you played any microgames, they knew exactly what you were talking about. They were talking about these games that came in small plastic clamshells that are now about the size of a cell phone. that you would open up and they would have all the components inside. And they tended to be hex encounter style games. They were popular games. Now, the thing is with these, yes, the packaging is small, but I would say these games are big as far as rules depth and complexity. Like these were micro games for war gamers, right? They weren't micro games for the average person. I'm talking about games like Ogre, Car Wars, and even Starfleet Battles had a micro game version. And I can't think of anyone who would call Starfleet Battles a micro game in any way, unless they happen to be from the 80s and are using that definition.
Well, I've also heard of micro games as being called pocket games. Like if a game fits in your pocket, then it's pretty micro. Personally, I like purse games. If I can toss it in my purse and leave it there in case of gamey emergency, that's a micro game.
Yeah, we run into some interesting stuff as well, because one thing that I don't think we really addressed is what about, the travel games of chess? Like you can get travel games of chess, which are really small, but they have more than 20 components and they are complex games. And, do you call that a micro game just because you have sized it down enough to, fit in your back pocket?
Now, one thing I did like about that definition of the 20 components or less, it did say an addition of a game. And I like that. Because in that case, that would be a chess micro game. It'd be more than 20 components. But it would fit the 20 cubic inches part. So I do like the fact it said addition of a game, which leads you to there are pocket versions of games. One I put on the list tonight because it's one we particularly own. Deanna called out the Quirkle cubes, or I don't know, what is it? Mini Quirkle?
Travel Quirkle. I think it's a little on the big side.
My Travel Catan is surprisingly small. I could fit that in a glove box or in a purse. It's not going to fit in my pocket. Definitely won't fit in my wallet. But I wouldn't, again, Catan to me, I think microgame also implies not too complicated, right? I don't know. Is the game difficult? Like the reason I think Ogre, Car Wars, and Starfleet Battles don't count is you're looking at 2-3 hour games. And to me, anything that takes 2 to 3 hours is not micro anything.
As soon as you said toss out the box, the first thing that came to my mind is things like Aquilin, Sensu. If I have a grid, I can play that with just the pieces, which I can throw in a bag, and that becomes very portable. Again, I think it becomes a portable game, a travel game, but not a micro game because it's not small enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say like you could probably make a micro version of, say, Onitama. That could possibly have less than 20 components. I don't know how many cards are in Onitama. But Aquilin, that's just too many tiles, right? It's too many individual pieces, and you can only make them so small.
I haven't delved too deeply into this, but what about Railroad Inc.? Is Railroad Inc. a micro game?
I would say it is. I think that fits. It's less than 20 components. It's a small box. The expansions are just dice. So yeah, I would think it works. Actually, there you go, Sean. You got one for the list. You can add. Well, we'll have 15 or whatever, one more game. I would add those to it. I didn't even think of them. Part of it was I'm focused on the games I own, right? So when I walk around, I did not even think of that. Yeah, I would think they would fit.
I think a lot of these roll and move games kind of do. Size wise, even something that the game, the chocolate and nuts game we had, where you're playing the bingo.
Dolce.
It's got too many components, but size wise, you're
I don't know. There. With the individual player boards for every player, it takes up a lot of room.
Roll through the ages.
Because everyone has their own player board, and then there's the central cards.
Right.
But yeah, it's
like Roll Through the Ages, which is one of the first roll and writes I ever tried. I didn't really care for it, but that's pretty small. Would that be a micro game?
But again, once you put the 4 wooden player boards together, that's significantly larger than many of them. I think Splendor takes up less space if you shrink it down. I don't know. To me, it's a kind of a combination of all things. And I'm going to use a popular term. To me, it's kind of like porn. Like, you know it when you see it. You're just like, yeah, that's a micro game, and that's not. And I have like a gut reaction to it. Like for me, a deck of cards is too big. To me, 54 cards, 50 cards, 40 cards is probably not a micro game. Well, like, is Magic the Gathering a micro game with a 40 card deck? Like to me, that's too much.
See, Ryan called it out, and this was the first thing that I thought of when someone says micro games to me today in this day and age.
Yeah.
Does it fit in an Altoids tin? It's those mint games, that size. It's a little bit smaller than a deck of cards. Those tin, mint mints, mint tins. Those that's the size that I'm thinking of.
See, to me, I figure you can go a little bigger. Like I said, I think the thing I came up with earlier, the photo case, right? You know, you go out and you buy the photo case and you get different colored ones. Two of our big fans, Danielle and Owen, have these in the trunk where they have 12 different micro games in the back of their trunk where they open it up. And there are various levels of games. And to me, like a photo case to me is still, it'll fit in my pocket. I think Altoid tin is a little too small, but I wouldn't go any bigger than that.
You know, fit it in a cigarette case, you know.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. If you can fit it in a cigarette,
you don't really, people don't really talk about those much.
Cigarette case games. That just feels dated now.
A little bit, yes.
Yes. Some people do smoke, but
well, one heads up.
So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a bit to it, right? It's not even just physical side. It's kind of the feel of the game. Stuff that's quick to play, easy to learn. Like I've got some heavier games on the list tonight, but like heavier compared to a heavy game is nothing, right? We're like I think anything like weight 2 or under almost on Board Game Geek, 2.5 for sure. And then a small footprint, something you can toss in a glove box, in a purse, easily portable. You throw it in a pocket. Doesn't have to fit in your wallet, though we do have one of those on the list too.
All right, well, one heads up about tonight's list. We haven't played a ton of micro games. Yeah. Shame on us. So to give you a decent list tonight, we had to throw out our usual step of making sure the games are currently in print and purchasable. Yeah. Due to that, some of the games mentioned tonight may be a bit hard to find.
And we do apologize for that. So the first game that popped into my head when this topic was even like when Deanna's like, well, you brought it up on the last podcast where you were reading off. Actually, I think that was during the after show. You were reading off some feedback during one of our recent giveaway from our giveaway. And that's where this question came from. And the first thing I thought of was Coinage. Now, Coinage is a credit card sized game that you play with pocket change. Now, the standard game is 1 credit card, 2 sides, but if you back the Kickstarter, there were other maps available. Now, this is a little harder to play in Canada since we got rid of pennies, which actually makes a bit of an impact because it's not designed, like the areas aren't designed to hold larger coins like loonies. So it's a bit of an issue here. Now, thankfully, I got the game when we still had pennies, and they did include, if you want to, you could sticker your actual currency so it looked like in-game currency, and I did that. So I thought that was kind of funny. It's not a bad game. It's an area majority war game that has to do with, you know, revealing your hand of coins and showing them and then being able to capture areas in the map where larger coins could capture smaller ones. Gameplay was good. Now I will admit my copy is not in my wallet. Instead, it is in a baggie with those coins, with the stickers, because I don't tend to carry change anymore. Not just Canada getting rid of pennies. How many people actually carry change anymore? Ever since the parking meters now have an app, I have found very little reason to carry change anymore. And unless someone opens up a retro arcade, even then it'll probably take some kind of payment card. I'm not going to have change. But I got to say, the game, like, for something that literally fit in my wallet, it was pretty dang good.
I gotta wonder if it wouldn't still be in your wallet if we still had pennies here in Canada.
It might have been. It might have. One thing you're going to see a lot of on this list, and one thing you won't see at all, are love letter clones, isotopes, derivatives, and love letter. I am not a huge fan of love letter, but I love the movement it started. The 18 card game challenge. A lot of games I put on the list tonight all spawned from what was love letter, which was part of a design goal of designing 18 card games, which makes sense when you're talking about micro games. Now, my favorite of these is Lucha Jefe. This is a luchador wrestling card game where you are making up a team of 2 cards. One will be your, like, once everything's all settled, right? Because the same thing, you draw a card, you play a card, you discard a card, and you always have a card in your hand, and you're playing back and forth, and people are swapping and moving things, and it's got all that similar gameplay to Love Letter. But what you're trying to do is end up with 2 things: your wrestler and who's outside the ring. And depending on who they are and what type of wrestlers they are, all makes all kinds of difference to figure out who wins the match. And one of the things they did is you collect a certain number of wins to win the game, and they actually gave you tiny wrestling belts to wear as finger rings, so you can show off your belts for how many rings you've had or how many wins you've had. And honestly, part of what makes the game great is throwing in promotions and other bits that are part of the game, but not, you know, like, it's just way more fun if you are trash talking each other and doing promos between doing things and explaining how your guy outside the ring helped you out to win the match.
All right. I have got Kiri-Ai The Duel. It's an 18 card samurai dueling game, not quite wrestling, but it comes in a clever cloth case that's based on a historic wallet from the Edo era. It's quick to play. You only need a small amount of table space. And basically, as you're playing, it's like move forward, strike at the spot in front of you, switch your stance, strike at the spot beside you. You're trying to get 2 hits on your opponent before they take you out. It's neat, and the flow of it reminds me of playing Bushido Blade on the PlayStation back in the 90s.
Next, I have Empire Engine. This is another Love Letter spinoff. This one, though, is an engine building game. It uses 2 cards that are up in front of you for the entire game, and these have gears on them. And every round, you have to turn your gears. And then whatever's showing at the top of your gear determines what actions you take, including attacking the other players, defending from attacking, collecting resources, and more. This was the first of the 18 card games that felt like a Euro game, right? Like it was an engine builder. It wasn't just some bluffing game, deduction game. And I loved it for that. Getting back to the bluffing games, another one I have is Cypher. This is another card game in a cloth bag from AEG. This is a cyberpunk game where there's a class system that's a big part of play. There's upper class, middle class, and lower class. And it's all about collecting the most influence and not ending up with or having a specific card. It's not whoever has the lowest card, it's whoever has the princess. This was all about scoring points. And what I liked about this one is there was a ton more player interaction, where if you played a certain high class citizens, they would wipe out all the lower class citizens. Or if this person had this character who was middle class in play, you couldn't play people of the higher class. And it did this really interesting, like I like the background and the setting. Like I read this one and I was like, is this based on some kind of cyberpunk game that I can learn more about? Which at the time, I don't think it was. I think it was a standalone game. But like the universe really came out in what was only an 18 card game. So that really impressed me.
I'm going with Sirens from Envy Born Games. It's another 18 card game. And it comes with some wee wooden ship tokens, but they truly aren't needed for play, to the point that we originally could not figure out why they were in the box. So if you ditch the tokens, ditch the box, you've got a game that's perfectly portable. You play as Sirens, competing to see who will create the most compelling song and lure sailors to your side of the cliffs. You do this by drafting and laying out cards to create a song. And it's a song that you can actually use an app to play out loud. So that's kind of neat. And I love the art style, which is a play on the artwork found on Grecian urns.
Yeah, and those tokens are actually a Kickstarter exclusive. They were part of a promo pack. So not everyone will have to worry about those. And I'm just going to slight correction. It's actually more than 18 cards, but there's only 18 cards you kind of play with, because there's more cards because of the starting cards, whatever you call them, the reference cards.
And then the solo option.
And then the solo options. And then there's also the card that references the different card abilities.
Oh, you're right. So
this one actually does 22? Break the 20 component rule, but it's 18 cards you play the game with. So I think it still fits. And how many components are there in Hive? I actually don't know how many insects each side gets. So I'm not sure on that one. But Hive is a classic at this point, 2-player abstract strategy game. Pretty small on its own. It's behind me there. It has limited pieces. It fits in a glove box. But I would say it's probably a little too big for consider a micro game. But then there is Hive Pocket, which is half the size. And I think at that point, you're getting to that pocket size. This honestly used to be one of our biggest 8-night games that we had with us at all times. Had downtown Windsor. If we stopped at a bar or whatever, we'd play. But it's been a long time since we've broken this one out. It has a very chess-like feel because every insect moves differently. And then the goal of capturing the opponent's queen kind of fits. But there's no board. So like unlike chess, there's no board. The board is kind of like the pieces as you play them. So as you add insects to the hive grows. And that's actually a big part of the game is you can only have one hive and you can't break the hive. And that's part of the strategy in it.
So there are 22 pieces in Hive, 11 per side.
Oh, so close. So close. So it goes on there with Sirens. I think this is my last one. My last love letter knockoff, which is Lost Legacy. There's technically 2 versions of this. This is a deduction game, but not as much a social deduction game. This isn't bluffing. This isn't lying to your opponents. Instead, you are playing cards trying to determine what the Lost Legacy card is. It's one card that's kind of hidden at the beginning of the game. And because of that, it has a semi-co-op feel, because if no one guesses the Lost Legacy correctly, the entire team loses the game. So yes, you want to be the one that finds it, but you want someone to find it, which I kind of liked. Now, there are 2 versions of this. One, Lost Legacy the Starship, and Lost Legacy the Garden, at least in North America. Actually, it's originally a Japanese game, and there's even more. But here in North America, there's two, the Starship and the Garden. And what I like about this is you can mix and match them to try different roles to see how you like to combine them. But even more so, you can put the two together to make a 6-player game, which is a nice touch because a lot of these micro games do not play higher player counts.
Well, I've got Confusing Lands. This is another game from Envy Born Games, which, like Sirens, is from their Tiny Game series. It's an 18-card drafting game. Wait, am I wrong again? Is it actually secretly over 18?
No, this one I think has exactly 18 cards.
Where you're laying out cards to create a sky island. There are interesting decision points as you choose not only which cards to draft, but which side of the double-sided cards you're going to play. One side just has landscape features, and the other includes scoring conditions. The catch is each scoring condition starts at minus 10 points, and once they're played onto your landscape, they can't be covered up. So overall, it makes for a rather unforgiving and fun 2-player experience.
Next one is technically a kid's game, something you'll find at educational toy stores, and that is Rory Story Cubes. I didn't actually think of this one until doing research and seeing it on someone else's microgame list, and I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't that count? Because all it is 9 dice with pictures on each of the sides, and 9 unique dice with different pictures on each side, and then a rule book with a variety of games you can play with them. Now, most of these are pretty small improv RPG games where players tell story based on the symbols on the dice. But there's all kinds of different variations. One where you like roll all the dice and tell a complete story. Another one where you add to an existing story and pick a die. And there are other parts of that. Now, some sets even came with small plastic cases that held 9 dice, which I got to say, those were great for tossing into a pocket or purse.
All right. Well, I do have one to add to this list that we haven't actually talked about, and I didn't even realize until we were talking about this. But Pass the Pigs. It's
there you go.
2 pigs and a scoring card. You can't get much smaller than that, both in size and the number of components.
2 Walkerville game nights ago, not the last one, but the one before, there was a group that played Pass the Pig for hours on end. They seem to be having a great time with it.
I've never actually tried that game, so I have no opinion. The Holiday Hijinks series of escape room games from our sponsor, Grand Gamers Guild. We can't forget them, not just because they're our sponsor, but because these are great little puzzle games. They use a variety of truly creative ways to fit a lot of puzzle action into these 18-card games. Most take about an hour to play through, and they're all themed on various holidays. We've played through them with the family, and our kids have loved them. Plus, this last year, Grand Gamers Guild announced some new lines that are non-holiday based. There's the Endangered Rescue series, and there's an escape game that was part of the recent Tirnanog reprint Kickstarter. I highly recommend throwing one of these in your purse for the next time you've got 2 to 4 people in an hour to kill. I realize it's a little different because it's a one-off and it's an escape room game, but I still think it's a micro game.
And again, it was designed as part of that challenge, right? It was the, can you make a game with only 18 cards? Well, Jonathan Schaefer, who has done all of the original Holiday Hijinks games, managed to pull it off a number of times, like 9 times now. I did notice some of the new series are coming from other people. So Jonathan's got some competition for designing 18-card escape room games. These are fantastic. They're really good. I have enjoyed every single one of them, and I'm always blown away by how each one's different and works different and makes you think in different ways. This is one I wish I could find. I love this game. It is long out of print. So this, I don't know on the rest of our list. Holiday Hijinks are in print. Go to grandgamersguild.com. Use code Bellhop to save 10%. They're throwing a little plug there. Age of War. This is a small box game from Fantasy Flight Games. Really tiny little box, about the same size like Confusing Lands or Sirens. All that's in there are 14 cards, which show various castles with symbols on them, and 7 dice. Now, these are unique dice. They're not D6s. What you do is you roll your dice, and then you can either re-roll, but if you re-roll, you lose a die, and you can keep doing that till you're out of dice, or you attempt to claim one of the face-up castle cards. Now, each castle card has a list of like requirements, and they're various difficulty. One might be 1 symbol, another might be like 5 swords, another might be 3 different dice. But what you have to do is you have to fill them in one at a time. So you roll and you're like, oh, I have 5 swords. I'm going to try to take this castle, but it also needs a horseman. Well, the trick is you have to re-roll in between. So you're like, I climbed that row, now I got to roll again. And again, you get that ability, I can re-roll and lose a die. Well, you have to fill every requirement for the castle, and if you do, you claim it, and they're worth the points that are shown on it. But if you fail, you get nothing, and then it goes to the next player. Like, for one of those roll dice and put them on cards games, this is actually my favorite one out of all the ones I played, and I played about 4 or 5 different ones. I love for how small this is. And like I said, to me, this is the roll dice, match things on cards winner out of all those games I played.
Okay, we were talking about the fits in a Altoids tin requirement for a micro game. So for that, I'm going with Mintworks. I had a chance to try out Mintworks a few years back while at Breakout Con. It was a few years ago, but my memory of the game is that I was shocked by just how much of a real game it was. I thought the whole fits in a mint tin thing was a bit gimmicky and that the game was going to be really simplistic. However, I found it quite engaging, and I even stuck around to play a second round. So I probably should have tossed this one in with the honorable mentions, as we don't own a copy and I've only played it that one time.
Yeah, I haven't tried any of the games from Button Shy Games. Shame on us, because I've heard very good things about them. But I also had to say shame on Button Shy Games, because they reached out to us oddly synchronistically, because we were talking about doing this episode, and then I got an email 2 days later saying, do you want to be on our media creator list? And I'm like, oh, sure, I do. And then we went back and forth a bit, and I mentioned I hadn't played any of their games. We're like, we're going to send you a care package with some of our most popular games. And I'm like, great. Hopefully it'll show up in time for this episode. And we even talked about postponing this topic until I got the awesome email back that said, oh, sorry, we didn't realize you were in Canada. Shame on you. Do your research first. Don't reach out to me. I'm in Canada. We say it all the time. Plus also ship to Canada. Come on. How much could the shipping cost? Is it not worth it for you to ship to Canada for us to cover your games? Might have been on the list tonight. More of them might have been on the list tonight if we had a chance.
There we go. All right. Well, we've got an interesting question in the chat room there, and that is, do tiny epic games fit for the micro games? Now, they're a little on the larger side, and they do have a large number of components. So I would lean to no. Yes, they are tiny compared to a giant tabletop board game, but when you get down to the micro game, I think we're talking smaller than tiny epic.
It's the same as Gloomhaven Buttons and Bugs. We were talking about whether or not we would put that in as an honorable mention. Is that a micro game? Well, it's a micro game compared to the original for sure.
Oh, hell yeah.
I believe I described it as a Mary Poppins a carpet bag amount of stuff in that tiny box. Once you open it, it's definitely more than 20 components.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't think they count. Plus, I found the tiny epic games, besides being in a small box, took up a lot of room. Tiny Epic Galaxies, everyone has their own little player board in front of them, which takes up room, and they got their own symbols. And then there's the cards that go up in the middle. And I'm like, to me, that like small box game, yes. Yep. Small game, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I think they still fit travel.
Yeah, I think a lot of these games, these things that are called tiny, I find in many instances are a reduced version of something massive. So it's more approachable. You can fit it on, the coffee shop table instead of the 4x4, game room table, but it's still not a micro game. Micro games are really that special type of game that is going to take up the least space possible.
Yeah. Now, I do have one honorable mention I am going to throw out, and I think these 100% qualify, and that is the Paco games from Oink Games. They're all 3 letters. There are tons. Some of the more popular ones I remember hearing about are BUS. I had no clue how small these were. Like, I've seen pictures, I've shared deals on them on Amazon. There are certain content creators that love these games, talk about them all the time. Suzanne Sheldon is an example of an advocate for the Paco games. But our friendly local game stores have never carried them. And it wasn't until we were on a trip in St. Jacobs, Ontario, at a awesome toy store in a church called Toy Soup, that I saw these in person. They are, I don't know if these exist anymore for someone who's not as old as us to understand, but they are the size of a pack of spearmint gum. These sticks of gum. It is 5 pieces of gum thick. Like, They are smaller than my finger, or about the size of my finger. I could not believe how small these games are. And they're ridiculously small. And I have heard that there are fantastic ones. From what I've heard of the series, there are no bad ones. There's just some that are better than others. This is another one that like we need to try some. And I actually regret not picking up any while we were at the store at Toy Store at St. Jacobs. Instead, we bought Point City, which we weren't enthused with. So I'm like, man, I need to buy some of these Oink games.
I mean, I really wanted to try Point City, so
there was a reason.
Yeah. They were so tiny, and that's the exact perfect description of it. It's a pack of chewing gum size. If, you know, like you said, for some younger people, that may not make sense. Yeah. I've got one honorable mention, and it's sort of like a hunt and find challenge for y'all. If you go to PMP Arcade, there are a lot of microgames on there. Yeah. So if you are looking for free to low cost print and play microgames, that is your... There, you go on there and search for micro or search for tin, and you will find like page after page of them.
Heck, I'll throw in one more. The only reason I didn't put it on the list because it's solo only. Pocket Dungeon. That thing was so much fun. It is a spiral bound book. All you need is a pencil, and it's got, I don't remember, 50, 100 dungeons in it, and a really neat system for attacking monsters where you like lift up your pencil and close your eyes. I'm going to throw that one on there just because I found it while I was going around, and I'm like, oh, the list is basically done at this point. Do I want to throw another one on there? Plus, it's solo only. But like something you toss in your back pocket, or again, leave in the van. Like, I don't know why I don't have it in the van right now, because I've sat at appointments recently and been like, man, I wish I had something to play here.
All right. Well, now that you've heard about our favorite games, I'd love to check out what our lobby, the chat room here on Twitch, has to add. But we haven't had a lot. There were a lot of questions, a lot of interest in the topic, but it seems like, much like us, a lot of our fans may not be into the micro games.
There was a question, is Scout a micro game? And I would say no, because we were talking about how many cards are in the deck. And Scout's a larger deck, isn't it? More like the Deadlies, right? It's probably like a 52 card deck. So I would say probably not. Having only played it once at a demo at Origins, I have to admit, I don't have a really solid version of it in my head.
I have not played Scout. 45 cards.
Other games that we saw referenced places were things like One Deck Dungeon, which, while again, it's a small box, there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of cards. There's a lot of dice. It's not a small component game, and it takes up a bit of space once you get building your dungeon or your galaxy, if you happen to have the One Deck Galaxy. So again, small box, but not small component count or space it takes up.
And then Red Meeple Ryan is suggesting Urban Sprawl, but that's not one I'm familiar with.
No, I think he's thinking of Sprawlopolis, which is an 18-card deck game where you're overlapping. Urban Sprawl,
the larger Greatest Little Cities, a mint tin game.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
No, I was right. He said Sprawlopolis.
Okay. But there is Greatest Little Cities is a mint tin game. It's literally one of those Altoids games. There's way more than 20 components because it actually comes with 92 hex chits. But it all does fit into an Altoids tin. Go.
Yeah, Sprawlopolis actually is a very good call. It's very similar to Confusing Lands, which Deanna called out, and we are going to be reviewing later in the show. It's a game where you have to play cards overlapping existing cards to be able to build a city, where you're trying to connect different districts and everything. And honestly, it's a good one. I didn't make my list. Like, I'd rather play Confusing Lands, or I'll dive into like Hokkaido or one of the bigger overlapping card games that are out there. Actually, it's Sprawlopolis. You might not be overlapping. You might be playing them. I can't tell in this picture if they're overlapping or not. But it is an 18-card game, and you're building a city by playing them. And I will admit, I did not list every game we own. Pusheen, we recently received a review copy of. Could have been on this list. I think Breakdancing Meeple qualifies, but is not on this list.
Yeah, I mean, Breakdancing Meeple is basically Pax the Pigs, but with meeples instead of...
Yes. Gwen's Harper's favorite game, Gelatinous, probably counts. No, there's probably more than 20 dice in that game if you have enough players. So yes, the cards overlap in Sprawlopolis. I think Sprawlopolis is a good one. It probably fit on our list. It's just, I don't own it, so I didn't think of it. And honestly, for that style, Confusing Lands. A very, very popular one for people out there is Circle the Wagons. I have not had a chance to play that. Circle the Wagons is yet another 18 card overlap your cards to protect your wagons. It's supposed to be like a Western game where you're circling the wagons to protect them.
Yeah, when Sean said pass the pig, I did think of gelatinous, and I'm like, technically left, right, center is a microgame, but I'm not recommending it.
Chips. I think there's more than 20 chips in LCR. I think we're good to move on. Thank you for the suggestions. Even more so, thank you for just taking part tonight. So I hope this helped you find some new tiny games to check out. Chatroom didn't bring up a lot of them, so maybe they need to get out there like us and try some of these games out. This did one big thing for me, which point out how few micro games I played. So my goal right now, for kind of the next year or so, is to watch for these, right? When I go to con season, I'm going to be looking for more micro games. As I mentioned earlier, we're in contact with Button Shy, so I would love to try some of their games. Maybe we can hook up. You won't have to ship if we meet up at a con. And I would love to try some Oink games.
Yeah, definitely. The next time we're at a convention, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for micro games because we haven't played many. What other pocket games should we be checking out? What would you recommend to someone looking to explore the world of micro games that we didn't cover? Tell us about it in the comments, or better yet, join our Discord at discord.tabletopbellhop.com and strike up a conversation there.